In a universe where humans are considered the weakest, most primitive species, Princess Zaratil of the mighty Valkyrie Empire has just received the most shocking news of her 847-year life. Her mother, Empress Nyxaria, has arranged her marriage to a human male from the backwater planet Earth. But Princess Zaratil isn't just any royal heir. She's a warrior who has conquered star systems, a diplomat who has ended century-long wars, and now she's about to discover that everything she thought she knew about humans was completely wrong. When a human arrives at the Imperial Palace, he doesn't bow, doesn't beg, and doesn't show an ounce of fear toward the most feared princess in the known galaxy. Instead, he does something that shocks everyone. He challenges her to prove why she's worthy of rejecting him. What follows is an epic tale of cultural clash, unexpected romance, political intrigue, and the revelation that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places. As ancient enemies threaten the Empire and dark secrets surface, Princess Zaratil must choose between her pride and the possibility that this strange human might be exactly what her people need to survive. Prepare yourself for a story that will challenge everything you think you know about strength, love, and what it truly means to be powerful in a galaxy full of dangerous surprises. The crystalline walls of the Valkyrie Imperial Throne Room had witnessed many moments of fury throughout their 1,000-year history, but none quite like this. Princess Zaratil stood before the massive obsidian throne, her silver-scaled hands clenched into fists, violet eyes blazing with an intensity that made even the royal guards shift uncomfortably in their ceremonial armor. "You cannot be serious, Mother," Zaratil said, her voice carrying the controlled rage that had once made entire star systems surrender without firing a single shot. "A human? You wish me to marry a human?" Empress Nyxaria remained seated on her throne, seemingly unperturbed by her daughter's outburst. At over 1,500 years old, the Empress had ruled the Valkyrie Empire through 3 galactic wars, numerous rebellions, and countless diplomatic crises. Her daughter's anger, while impressive, was hardly the most challenging thing she had faced that week. "I am entirely serious, my dear," the Empress replied, her own violet eyes studying her daughter with the calculating gaze that had made her one of the most feared rulers in the galaxy. "The marriage has already been arranged. The human will arrive in 7 rotations." 7 rotations? Zaratil's voice rose to a pitch that made the crystal walls hum in sympathy. "Mother, have you lost your mind? Humans are barely more evolved than the primitive beasts on Graxon 7. They live for less than a century. They have no natural armor, no telepathic abilities, and their technology is so backward they still use chemical propulsion to leave their home planet's atmosphere." The Empress stood slowly, her full height of 9 feet making her an imposing figure even to her equally tall daughter. The ceremonial robes of state flowed around her like liquid starlight, embedded with gems from 100 conquered worlds. "Your assessment of human capabilities appears to be based on outdated intelligence reports," Nyxaria said calmly. "Perhaps you should reserve judgment until you meet him." "Meet him?" Zaratil laughed, a sound like breaking glass that echoed through the vast chamber. "Mother, I have no intention of meeting this creature, let alone marrying it. I am the heir to the Valkyrie Empire, the conqueror of the Andorian Nebula, the negotiator of the Trilateral Peace Accords. I will not be reduced to some political pawn in whatever scheme you've devised." The Empress descended the steps of her throne with measured grace, each footstep echoing in the sudden silence. The royal guards, all hand-picked warriors from the elite Shadowlade Corps, stood at attention but kept their eyes carefully averted from the confrontation between mother and daughter. "You speak of conquest and negotiation," Nyxaria said, stopping directly in front of her daughter. "Tell me, child, what do you know of the Zephyrian Dominion's movements near our Outer Rim territories?" Zaratil frowned at the sudden change of subject. "The Zephyrians have been probing our defenses for the past 3 cycles, testing response times and fleet positions. Standard reconnaissance operations. Our intelligence suggests they're planning something, but nothing our forces can't handle. And the Crocian hegemony? Still licking their wounds from the last war. They lost 60% of their battle fleet in the Sigma Draconis engagement. It will be decades before they pose a threat again. The Ethereal Collective? Silent as always. They keep to their dimension-hopping ships and rarely interfere in galactic politics. Epsilonixaria nodded slowly. Your intelligence is accurate, but incomplete. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something unprecedented. The Zephyrians, Crocians, and Ethereals have entered into a formal alliance. For the first time in galactic history, 3 of our greatest enemies have united against us. Zaratiel felt a chill run down her spine. Each of those civilizations individually represented a significant threat to the Valkyrie Empire. United, they could potentially overwhelm even their mighty war fleets. That's concerning, she admitted. But what does this have to do with forcing me into marriage with a primitive human? Because, my dear daughter, the Empress said, her voice taking on the tone she used when addressing the Imperial Council, that primitive human represents something far more valuable than advanced technology or superior numbers. He represents potential. Potential. Zaratiel scoffed. Mother, humans barely qualify as a spacefaring species. Their fastest ships take months to cross distances our vessels cover in hours. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. What possible potential could they have that would interest us? Nixaria walked to one of the massive crystal windows that looked out over the imperial capital. The city stretched for hundreds of miles in all directions, its towering spires reaching toward the stars like metallic fingers. Millions of Valkyrie citizens went about their daily lives below, unaware that their empire faced its greatest threat in over 2 centuries. Have you ever wondered, the Empress asked quietly, why humans have survived and thrived on a planet that should have killed them millions of years ago? Because they're too stubborn to die properly, Zaratiel muttered. Precisely. Nixaria turned back to her daughter with something that might have been a smile. Their homeworld, Earth, is a death trap by any reasonable standard. Unstable weather patterns, active geology, massive predators, disease-carrying parasites, and radiation exposure that would kill most civilized species within days. Yet not only did humans survive on this world, they flourished. They became the dominant species without natural weapons, armor, or enhanced senses. Through breeding like insects and destroying their environment. Through adaptation, innovation, and an absolutely remarkable refusal to accept defeat. The Empress's voice carried a note of something that sounded almost like admiration. Do you know what the most dangerous human military doctrine is called? Zaratiel shrugged. Overwhelming stupidity, total war. Nixaria let the words hang in the air for a moment. When humans decide something must be accomplished, they commit everything they have to that goal. Their entire civilization, their technology, their lives, their futures. They hold nothing in reserve. It's a concept that terrifies every major military strategist in the galaxy. It's also a concept that leads to extinction. And yet they're still here, while a dozen other species that considered themselves superior have vanished into history. The Empress moved closer to her daughter again. The human male who will arrive in 7 rotations is not just any representative of his species. His name is Marcus Chun, and he is quite possibly the most dangerous human alive. Despite herself, Zaratiel found her interest piqued. Dangerous how? Did he accidentally blow up one of their primitive weapons? He prevented a war. The simple statement hit Zaratiel like a physical blow. In Valkyrie culture, preventing a war was considered far more difficult and impressive than winning one. It required not just military strength, but diplomatic skill, strategic thinking, and the ability to understand and manipulate complex political situations. What war? She asked, her voice more subdued now. The Human Colonial War. When Marcus Chun was 26 years old, tensions between Earth and its outer colonies had reached a breaking point. The colonies wanted independence, Earth wanted to maintain control, and both sides had assembled fleets that would have devastated human space in any conflict. The war was inevitable, expected by every intelligence service in the galaxy. Nixaria paused, watching her daughter's reaction carefully. Marcus Chun was sent as a junior diplomatic attaché to the peace talks, not to negotiate, understand, but to observe and report. However, when the senior diplomats on both sides walked out of the negotiations, he took it upon himself to continue the talks alone. For 72 hours, he negotiated continuously with representatives from 17 different colonial worlds and the Earth government. And he created a framework for colonial autonomy that satisfied both sides while actually strengthening the overall human civilization. The war that every expert predicted would destroy humanity never happened. Instead, the humans emerged stronger and more united than they had ever been. Zaratil absorbed this information slowly. Preventing a civil war through negotiation was impressive by any standard, but doing it as a junior official with no formal authority was remarkable. One success doesn't make him valuable to us, she said finally. That was 8 years ago, her mother replied. Since then, he has prevented 3 other potential conflicts, negotiated trade agreements that have tripled human economic output, and established diplomatic relationships with 6 previously hostile alien species. He is currently serving as humanity's primary ambassador to the Galactic Council, despite being younger than most council members' children. The throne room fell silent except for the barely audible hum of the environmental systems. Zaratil found herself reconsidering her immediate dismissal of this human, but her pride still rebelled against the entire situation. Even if he's marginally competent, she said slowly, why marriage? Why not a simple alliance? Why must I be sacrificed for this political maneuvering? Nixaria's expression softened slightly, revealing a hint of the mother beneath the Empress. Because, my daughter, this is not just about political alliance. The combined forces of our 3 greatest enemies outnumber us 2-1. Their technology has advanced significantly in recent years, and their unity gives them strategic advantages we cannot match with conventional responses. So we need humans to help us fight. We need humans to teach us how to think differently, the Empress corrected. For 1,000 years, the Valkyrie Empire has dominated through superior technology and military might. We have always been stronger, faster, and smarter than our enemies. But now we face opponents who match us in these areas, and our traditional advantages are no longer sufficient. Nixaria moved to another window, this one showing the massive orbital shipyards where the Imperial fleet was constructed and maintained. Humans don't think like us, she continued. They don't rely on overwhelming superiority or ancient traditions. They adapt, they improvise, and they find solutions that no one else would consider. Their entire civilization is built on the principle of succeeding despite being outmatched. And you believe this Marcus Chun can teach us these skills? I believe that a formal alliance between our species, sealed by marriage between their most capable diplomat and our future empress, could provide us with new strategies and perspectives that might save our empire. The empress turned back to face her daughter. But more than that, I believe you might discover that humans are far more interesting than you assume. Zaratil stared at her mother for a long moment, her mind racing through the implications of everything she had heard. The threat from the allied enemies was real and significant. The potential value of human strategic thinking was intriguing, even if she remained skeptical. But the idea of marrying an alien, no matter how diplomatically skilled, still filled her with revulsion. What if I refuse? She asked quietly. Then you'll be free to do so, Nixaria said simply. I am your mother, but I am also your empress. I can arrange a marriage, but I cannot force you to go through with it. However, I ask that you at least meet him before making your decision. And if I meet him and still refuse, then we will find another way to secure the alliance, though it will be far more difficult and less effective. Zaratil looked around the throne room that would one day be hers to rule. The weight of responsibility for billions of citizens, hundreds of worlds, and an empire that stretched across a quarter of the galaxy suddenly felt heavier than ever before. 7 rotations, you said? 7 rotations. And I am free to refuse after meeting him? Completely free. Zaratil straightened to her full height, her royal bearing reasserting itself. Very well, mother. I will meet this human diplomat, but I make no promises beyond that. That is all I ask. As Zaratil turned to leave the throne room, her mother called after her. One more thing, daughter. When you meet him, remember that appearances can be deceiving. Humans may seem fragile compared to us, but they have survived longer than most species by being far more resilient than they appear. Zaratil paused at the massive doors that led out of the throne room. Are you trying to convince me to marry him, or warning me about him? Perhaps both. The Empress replied with what was definitely a smile now. Marcus Chun is not what you expect, in more ways than one. As the doors closed behind her daughter, Empress Nixaria returned to her throne and activated a secure communication link. A holographic image appeared in the air before her, showing a distinguished elderly human male with gray hair and intelligent eyes. Ambassador Chun, she said formally, I trust your son is prepared for his arrival. As prepared as anyone can be for meeting an alien princess who reportedly once destroyed an entire star system. The older human replied with dry humor. Though I suspect Zaratiel is the one who should be preparing herself. Indeed, the Empress agreed. Your son is quite certain he can handle this. Empress, my son once talked a Zephyrian warlord out of committing genocide by challenging him to a drinking contest and then discussing philosophy while they both got intoxicated on Altarian whiskey. I think he can manage one irritated princess. Nixaria's smile widened. 7 rotations, Ambassador. Let's hope this works. It will, the human ambassador replied confidently. Humans are very good at exceeding expectations. The communication link closed, leaving the Empress alone with her thoughts and the enormous responsibility of saving her empire. In 7 rotations, the most dangerous human diplomat in the galaxy would arrive at her court to meet the most stubborn princess in Valkyrie history. What could possibly go wrong? The Imperial Docking Bay had hosted countless diplomatic vessels over the centuries, from the elegant bioships of the Ethereal Collective to the massive dreadnoughts of visiting military commanders. But the small, angular craft that settled onto the landing platform with surprising grace was unlike anything the Valkyrie dockworkers had ever seen. Princess Zaratiel watched from the observation deck high above the docking bay, her violet eyes studying the human vessel with professional interest. It was roughly the size of a courier ship, painted in matte black with minimal markings. No ornate decorations, no displays of power or wealth, no intimidating weapons arrays. If anything, it looked almost humble. Not what you expected? Asked Captain Vexani, the head of the Royal Guard, standing at attention beside her. I expected something more primitive, Zaratiel admitted. Their ships are supposed to be bulky, chemical-burning monstrosities. This actually looks functional. Intelligence reports suggest human technology has advanced significantly in recent years, Captain Vexani replied, though they still refuse to share most of their innovations with other species. Below them, a landing ramp extended from the human vessel. Zaratiel leaned forward slightly, her curiosity overcoming her disdain. After 7 days of researching everything available about humans in the Imperial archives, she still found them a contradictory species. Weak yet persistent, primitive yet innovative, short-lived yet accomplished. A figure appeared at the top of the landing ramp, and Zaratiel's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Marcus Chun was not what she had expected. She had assumed he would be small and frail, like most humans she had seen in historical recordings. Instead, he stood nearly 7 feet tall, which was still shorter than her own 8.5 feet, but far more substantial than she had anticipated. His dark hair was neat, but not formal, and he wore simple black clothing that somehow managed to look both casual and dignified. But what caught her attention most was the way he moved. There was no hesitation, no obvious awe at the grandeur of the Imperial Palace, no nervousness at being surrounded by potentially hostile aliens. He descended the ramp with the confident stride of someone accustomed to walking into difficult situations. He doesn't look terrified, Captain Vexani observed. No, he doesn't, Zaratiel agreed, her frown deepening. Either he's incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Perhaps both, Your Highness. A formal reception committee waited at the bottom of the ramp, led by High Chamberlain Corthei, the elderly diplomat responsible for managing visiting dignitaries. The High Chamberlain stepped forward as Marcus reached the bottom of the ramp, beginning the traditional formal greeting in the ancient Valkyrie language. To everyone's surprise, Marcus responded in the same language, his pronunciation flawless and his inflection showing proper respect without subservience. Several of the reception committee exchanged glances. Learning ancient Valkyrie was notoriously difficult even for species with natural linguistic abilities. For a human to master it suggested either exceptional talent or extensive preparation. He speaks our language, Zaratil murmured. The formal diplomatic dialect, for what I can hear, Captain Vexani confirmed. That's unusual. The formal greetings concluded quickly, and the reception committee began escorting Marcus toward the palace proper. But as they passed beneath the observation deck, the humans stopped and looked directly up at the window where Zaratil stood watching. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Marcus smiled slightly and inclined his head in what was unmistakably a greeting directed specifically at her. Then he continued walking, leaving Zaratil staring after him with a mixture of surprise and irritation. How did he know you were there? Captain Vexani asked. The windows are supposed to be one-way transparent, Zaratil said slowly. Unless he has enhanced sensory equipment, the captain finished, which would suggest their technology is more advanced than we assumed. Zaratil turned away from the window, her mind racing. Everything about this human was challenging her preconceptions, and she found it deeply annoying. Inform a High Chamberlain that I will meet with the human in 1 hour, she ordered. The small receiving room, not the formal throne chamber. I want to get this over with quickly. Yes, Your Highness. An hour later, Zaratil stood in the small receiving room, which was still impressive by most standards, but far less intimidating than the main throne room. The walls were lined with tapestries depicting great moments in Valkyrie history, and the furniture was elegant but comfortable. She had chosen this room deliberately to set a tone that was formal but not overwhelmingly hostile. The doors opened, and High Chamberlain Korthei entered, followed by Marcus Chun. Your Highness, the High Chamberlain announced formally. May I present Ambassador Marcus Chun of the Human Diplomatic Corps. Zaratil studied the human as he approached. Up close, she could see that he was older than she had initially thought, probably in his 30s by human standards. His face showed the kind of weathering that came from extensive travel and difficult negotiations. His dark eyes were intelligent and alert, taking in every detail of the room without seeming obvious about it. Your Highness, Marcus said, offering a bow that was respectful but not subservient. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Ambassador Chun, Zaratil replied coolly. I trust your journey was uneventful. Remarkably so, considering I'm currently sitting in the heart of the most powerful military empire in the galaxy, Marcus said with what might have been humor. Your people's hospitality has been exemplary. The High Chamberlain looked between them uncertainly, clearly unsure whether to stay or leave. Zaratil made the decision for him. That will be all, High Chamberlain. Please ensure we are not disturbed. Your Highness, protocol suggests that I can handle a conversation with one unarmed human, Zaratil interrupted. Thank you. The elderly diplomat bowed and withdrew, leaving them alone. Zaratil gestured to a chair that had been specially constructed to accommodate human proportions. Please sit, she said. I understand we have much to discuss. Marcus settled into the chair with easy grace. That's an interesting way to describe a marriage proposal. Zaratil blinked in surprise. She had expected diplomatic dancing around the subject, formal negotiations, and careful probing of positions. She had not expected directness. You find the situation amusing? She asked. I find it fascinating, Marcus corrected. Two species that have never had significant contact being asked to consider a political alliance sealed by marriage between individuals who have never met. It's either the beginning of a great partnership or a spectacular disaster. Which do you think it will be? Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. That depends entirely on us, doesn't it? You don't seem concerned about the fact that I could kill you with my bare hands, Zaratil observed. Could you? Marcus asked with genuine curiosity. I mean, you're certainly physically stronger and faster than I am. But killing and fighting aren't the same thing. Fighting requires understanding your opponent's capabilities and intentions. Are you suggesting I don't understand your capabilities? I'm suggesting that neither of us understands the other's capabilities, Marcus said calmly. Which is why we're having this conversation. Zaratil found herself off balance. She had prepared for arrogance, fear, diplomatic maneuvering, or even romantic overtures. She had not prepared for philosophical discussion. What do you know about me? She asked. Officially? You're the heir to the Valkyrie Empire, a military commander who has never lost a battle, and a diplomat who helped negotiate the end of the Sigma War. You're considered one of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy, and your mother believes an alliance with humanity could help save your empire from a new threat. And unofficially, Marcus smiled, and Zaratiel was surprised to find a pleasant expression rather than the predatory grin she had expected. Unofficially, you're probably furious about this entire situation, convinced that humans are primitive and weak, and looking for a way to reject this alliance without damaging your mother's political position. The accuracy of his assessment was startling and irritating. And what makes you think you understand me so well? Because if our positions were reversed, I'd feel exactly the same way, Marcus said simply. No one likes having their future decided for them, especially by someone they've never met. Zaratiel stared at him for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone shorter, someone more frightened. Someone who would try to impress me with stories of human achievements or flatter me with compliments about my beauty and power. Would that have worked? It would have made it easier to dismiss you, Zaratiel admitted. Then, I'm glad I disappointed you. Despite herself, Zaratiel felt a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. This human was definitely not what she had expected. Tell me about preventing the colonial war, she said. I'm curious how a junior diplomat managed to succeed where senior officials failed. Marcus considered the question for a moment. The senior diplomats failed because they were trying to win. Each side came to the negotiations determined to get the best possible deal for themselves, which meant the other side had to lose. When both sides are trying to win and make the other lose, negotiation becomes impossible. So what did you do differently? I changed the game, Marcus said. Instead of trying to get each side to accept the other's victory, I focused on finding a solution that let everyone win. The colonies wanted independence and self-determination. Earth wanted to maintain unity and shared resources. Those goals aren't mutually exclusive if you approach them creatively. How so? The colonies gained complete autonomy over their internal affairs and the right to make their own decisions about trade and diplomacy. Earth retained coordination of military defense and major infrastructure projects. Instead of one government ruling over unwilling subjects, we created a federation of independent worlds working together for mutual benefit. Zaratiel nodded slowly. Elegant. But didn't that require both sides to trust each other? It required both sides to trust the framework we created, Marcus corrected. Trust between former enemies takes time to build. But trust in a fair and beneficial system can be established immediately if the system is designed properly. And you designed this system in 72 hours. I had help, Marcus said modestly. The colonial representatives were brilliant negotiators, and the Earth officials genuinely wanted peace. I just provided a different perspective on what victory could look like. Zaratiel found herself genuinely impressed despite her determination to remain skeptical. The ability to reframe a conflict in terms that allowed all parties to achieve their core goals was a rare diplomatic skill. Your mother mentioned that we're facing a threat from allied enemies, Marcus continued. May I ask about the nature of that threat? 3 of our traditional enemies have formed an unprecedented alliance, Zaratiel explained. Individually, each represents a significant challenge. United, they outnumber us and potentially outgun US. What are their primary advantages? Numbers, advanced technology, and strategic unity. The Zephyrians have the largest fleet, the Crocians have the most advanced weapons, and the Ethereals have dimensional manipulation technology that makes them extremely difficult to counter. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. What about their disadvantages? He asked finally. Zaratiel frowned. I'm sorry, every alliance has weaknesses. What are theirs? I hadn't considered that perspective. 3 historically independent species forming an alliance for the first time. They probably have different military doctrines, incompatible command structures, and competing objectives. Their unity is their strength, but it's also potentially their greatest vulnerability. Zaratiel felt a spark of excitement as she followed his reasoning. If we could find ways to stress the alliance. Exactly, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. First, tell me about Valkyrie military doctrine. How do your forces typically engage enemies? For the next hour, they discussed strategy and tactics with an intensity that surprised them both. Marcus asked insightful questions about Valkyrie capabilities and limitations, while Zaratiel found herself curious about human approaches to warfare and conflict resolution. "You think very differently than we do," she observed as their discussion wound down. "Is that good or bad?" "I'm not sure yet," Zaratiel admitted. "But it's interesting." Marcus smiled again. "High praise from someone who was ready to dismiss me as a primitive alien a few hours ago." "I didn't say I was ready to marry you," Zaratiel said quickly. "I didn't ask you to," Marcus replied easily. "Marriage is a significant decision that shouldn't be made hastily, especially between individuals from different species with no prior relationship." "Then, what are you proposing?" "That we take time to get to know each other," Marcus said. "Spend time together, learn about each other's cultures and perspectives, and see if we're compatible on a personal level before making any decisions about marriage or political alliances." "How much time?" "However long it takes. A few weeks, a few months, even a few years if necessary. The threat your empire faces is serious, but it's not immediate. We have time to do this properly." Zaratiel considered this proposal. It was reasonable, practical, and removed the pressure she had been feeling about making an immediate decision. It also suggested that Marcus was genuinely interested in her as a person rather than just as a political prize. "What would this courtship involve?" she asked carefully. "Get to know each other," Marcus said simply. "Shared meals, conversations, perhaps I could observe some of your duties as heir to the Empire. In return, you could learn about human culture and capabilities. We could work together on analyzing the strategic situation with your enemies. If we discover we work well together and enjoy each other's company, we can consider deeper partnership. If not, we part as friends and find other ways to create the alliance our peoples need. And if I decide I don't want to continue this courtship, then you tell me so, and I leave immediately with no hard feelings and no political consequences." Zaratiel studied Marcus's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agendas. She found none, which was either a sign of honesty or exceptional skill at concealment. "You're either very confident or very naive," she said finally. "Probably both," Marcus agreed cheerfully. "But I'd rather be optimistically naive than cynically closed-minded." Despite all her reservations and prejudices, Zaratiel found herself warming to this strange human. He was intelligent, respectful, and refreshingly direct. More importantly, he seemed genuinely interested in her as an individual rather than just as a means to an end. "Very well," she said slowly. "We will try this courtship, but I make no promises about the outcome." "Fair enough," Marcus said, standing and offering another respectful bow. "Thank you for giving us this opportunity, Your Highness." "Zara," she corrected automatically, then looked surprised at herself. "Zara," Marcus repeated, smiling. "Thank you, Zara." As he left the receiving room, Zaratiel remained seated, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. In the space of one conversation, this human had challenged her assumptions, impressed her with his insight, and somehow managed to make her curious about what would happen next. Perhaps her mother had been right about humans being more interesting than they appeared. Marcus Chun was definitely not what she had expected, and for the first time since learning about the marriage arrangement, Zaratiel found herself actually looking forward to their next conversation. What she couldn't know was that Marcus was having very similar thoughts as he walked through the palace corridors, escorted by silent guards. The princess was indeed as formidable as her reputation suggested, but she was also intelligent, thoughtful, and far more beautiful than any of the intelligence reports had mentioned. This courtship was going to be very interesting indeed. 3 weeks into their courtship, Zaratiel had developed a grudging respect for Marcus Chen's intellect and an irritating appreciation for his sense of humor. What she had not expected was to find herself genuinely enjoying their daily meetings in the palace war room, where they had been analyzing intelligence reports about the three-way alliance threatening her empire. "The Zephyrian fleet movements don't make sense," Marcus said, studying the holographic display that showed enemy positions across a dozen star systems. "They're massing forces in the Rigel sector, but it's too far from any strategic targets to be useful as a staging area." "Unless they're planning a feint," Zaratiel replied, manipulating the display to show potential attack vectors. "Draw our forces to defend the obvious targets while they strike somewhere unexpected. Possible, but inefficient. Feints work best when you have overwhelming superiority." They don't. They need every ship for the actual assault. Zaratil paused in her analysis to look at him. Over the past 3 weeks, she had learned that Marcus had an unusual talent for seeing patterns that others missed. His insights had already led to 3 significant revisions of their defensive strategies. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking the Zephyrians aren't planning to attack at all," Marcus said slowly. "At least not initially. Look at the timeline." He gestured to bring up a chronological display of enemy movements. The Zephyrians started massing forces 6 months ago. The Croatians began military preparations 4 months ago. The Ethereals only joined the alliance 3 months ago. But here's what's interesting. Marcus highlighted specific data points on the display. The Zephyrians have been consistently moving their forces to defensive positions, not offensive ones. They're acting like they expect to be attacked. Zaratil frowned, studying the data with fresh eyes. "That doesn't make sense. Why form an alliance to attack us, and then take defensive positions?" "Because maybe they're not planning to attack us," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe they're planning to defend against something else entirely." The implications hit Zaratil like a physical blow. If the three-way alliance wasn't directed against the Valkyrie Empire, then there was something else out there that scared 3 major galactic powers enough to unite against it. "But our intelligence clearly indicates the alliance is aimed at us," she protested. "Our intelligence indicates they've formed an alliance, and they're preparing for war," Marcus corrected. "We assumed the war was against you. What if it's not?" Zaratil activated her personal communicator. "Captain Vexani, I need a secure line to Imperial Intelligence immediately." Minutes later, a holographic image of Director Creshnell appeared above the conference table. The elderly Valkyrie intelligence chief looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Your Highness, how may I serve?" "Director, I need a complete review of all intelligence regarding the Zephyrian-Croatian Ethereal Alliance. Specifically, I want to know if there's any indication they're preparing to defend against a threat rather than planning an offensive against us." Director Creshnell's expression shifted from tired professionalism to sharp attention. "An interesting question, Your Highness. May I ask what prompted this line of inquiry?" Zaratil glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Ambassador Chun suggested we might be misinterpreting their intentions. "I see." The intelligence director's gaze shifted to Marcus with obvious skepticism. "And what expertise does the human ambassador have in galactic military analysis?" "The expertise of someone who prevented a civil war by recognizing that both sides were preparing to defend against what they perceived as threats rather than planning unprovoked attacks," Zaratil said sharply. "Director, please answer my question." Creshnell looked suitably chastened. "Of course, Your Highness. Give me 1 hour to compile the relevant data." The communication ended, leaving Zaratil and Marcus alone in the war room. "Thank you for supporting me," Marcus said quietly. "You were right to question our assumptions," Zaratil replied. "I should have thought of that perspective myself. You were thinking like a military commander, focusing on the threat to your empire. It's a natural response. And you were thinking like a diplomat, looking for the motivations behind the actions." Zaratil turned to face him fully. "Your people really do think differently than we do." "Different perspectives can be valuable," Marcus agreed, "especially when dealing with complex situations." They spent the waiting hour discussing other aspects of the strategic situation, but Zaratil found herself increasingly distracted by observations about Marcus himself. He had an easy confidence that never crossed into arrogance, and he listened to her ideas with genuine interest rather than polite attention. More surprisingly, he challenged her when he disagreed, showing none of the automatic deference she was accustomed to receiving. When Director Creshnell reappeared, his expression was grim. "Your Highness, I owe both you and Ambassador Chen an apology. A thorough review of the intelligence data suggests the ambassador's hypothesis may be correct." Zaratil leaned forward intently. "Explain." "The Alliance members have indeed been taking primarily defensive positions, and their communications traffic includes numerous references to the approaching storm and the dark tide. We initially interpreted these as metaphorical references to war against us, but in context, they appear to be referring to a specific external threat." "What external threat?" Marcus asked. "We're not certain," But we found indications of scout ships from an unknown technology base probing the outer rim of galactic civilization. The ships appear and disappear without warning, suggest advanced stealth capabilities, and use energy signatures we don't recognize. Zaratiel felt ice forming in her stomach. How long have these ships been operating? At least 8 months, possibly longer. They've been detected in sectors controlled by all 3 Alliance members, as well as several minor powers. Curiously, none have been detected in Valkyrie space. Why not? Marcus asked, echoing Zaratiel's thoughts. Unknown. It could be that they haven't reached our territory yet, or that our sensor networks are insufficient to detect them, or Director Crescent paused uncomfortably. Or what? Zaratiel demanded. Or they've been avoiding us deliberately for reasons we don't understand. Marcus and Zaratiel exchanged glances. The implications were disturbing on multiple levels. Director, I want all available intelligence on these unknown ships compiled and analyzed immediately, Zaratiel ordered. Also, prepare a formal inquiry to the Alliance members requesting information about this threat. Your Highness, opening communications with them will reveal that we've been monitoring their activities. Right now, that's less important than understanding what we're all facing, Zaratiel interrupted. If there's a threat great enough to unite 3 of our greatest enemies, we need to know everything about it. After the intelligence director signed off, Zaratiel slumped in her chair, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility more heavily than ever before. This changes everything, she murmured. It changes the strategic situation, Marcus agreed. But it also presents an opportunity. How so? If the Alliance was formed to defend against an external threat rather than attack you, then there's potential for cooperation rather than conflict. You might be able to join the Alliance instead of fighting it. Zaratiel stared at him. Join an alliance with our traditional enemies? Join an alliance to defend galactic civilization against an unknown threat. Marcus corrected. Your enemies become your allies, and instead of depleting your forces fighting each other, you combine them to face whatever's coming. The idea was radical, unprecedented, and possibly brilliant. It was also exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that had prevented the human colonial war. The politics would be incredibly complex, Zaratiel said slowly. Centuries of hostility don't disappear overnight. No, but immediate survival tends to be a powerful motivator, Marcus replied. And you have advantages the other Alliance members don't, such as you have the largest and most advanced intelligence network in the galaxy. You have a most powerful industrial base, and you have territory that apparently hasn't been probed by these unknown ships, which suggests either strategic value or information that could be useful to the defense. Zaratiel found herself nodding as she followed his reasoning. We'd be negotiating from a position of strength rather than weakness. Exactly. Instead of being the target of an alliance, you become the most valuable potential member of an expanded alliance. And how do we approach them? Hello, we know you formed a secret military alliance, and we'd like to join it. Marcus smiled. Actually, that's not a bad opening. Direct, honest, and focused on mutual benefit rather than past grievances. Before Zaratiel could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Emergency lights activated, and the war room's communication systems erupted with urgent messages. Unknown ships detected in the Altair system. Came the voice of Fleet Admiral Tornex. Multiple contacts, technology unknown, approaching at high speed. Zaratiel leaped to her feet, activating the main tactical display. The hologram showed the Altair system, one of the Empire's key industrial centers, with dozens of unidentified contacts moving in perfect formation toward the inhabited worlds. Fleet disposition, she demanded. Third Fleet is responding, ETA, 4 hours. Fifth Fleet can be there in 6 hours. Energy signatures? Marcus asked, surprising everyone by joining the conversation. Admiral Tornex paused. Unknown technology, but consistent with the stealth ships that have been probing the outer rim. Zaratiel and Marcus looked at each other with the same thought. The unknown threat had finally arrived in Valkyrie space, and they were completely unprepared. Admiral, I want continuous tactical updates, Zaratiel ordered. Also, prepare a priority message to the Zephyrian, Croatian, and ethereal leadership. Inform them that the threat they've been preparing for has appeared in our territory, and we request immediate consultation on joint defensive measures. Your Highness, are you certain? Do it now, Zaratiel commanded. We don't have time for political maneuvering. As the Admiral's image disappeared, Zaratiel turned to Marcus. It looks like we're going to test your cooperation theory sooner than expected. Are you ready for this? Marcus asked seriously. Zaratiel thought about her empire, her people, and the responsibility she carried. Then she thought about Marcus's insights, his unconventional perspective, and the possibility that cooperation might succeed where traditional military might would fail. No, she said honestly, but I'm ready to try something different. Good, Marcus said, moving to stand beside her as they watched the tactical display. Because I think we're about to make history. On the display, the unknown ships continued their approach toward Altair, while across the galaxy, ancient enemies began receiving messages that might transform them from adversaries into allies. The next few hours would determine the fate of multiple civilizations, and at the center of it all, a human diplomat and an alien princess stood together, ready to challenge everything their species had ever believed about war, cooperation, and survival. The real test of their partnership was just beginning. The Altair system burned. Zaratiel watched the tactical display in horrified fascination as the unknown ships systematically dismantled the Third Fleet's defensive formations. The Valkyrie warships, pride of the Imperial Navy, were being destroyed with an efficiency that defied belief. How are they doing this? Admiral Tornex demanded over the communication link, his voice strained with disbelief. Their weapons tear through our shields like they don't exist, but our heaviest guns barely scratch their hulls. Tactical analysis? Zaratiel asked, though she dreaded the answer. Technology level appears to be centuries beyond anything in our databases, came the reply from the fleet's tactical officer. Estimated casualty rate suggests total fleet destruction within 2 hours. Marcus moved closer to the display, studying the enemy formations with intense concentration. Pull back the remaining ships, he said suddenly. I'm sorry. Admiral Tornex's image appeared on screen, confusion evident on his face. Pull back your ships, Marcus repeated. Don't try to fight them directly. Retreat to the outer system and observe their behavior. Ambassador, with respect, this is a military matter, Admiral, Zaratiel interrupted. Follow the ambassador's recommendation. Withdraw to observation range immediately. Your Highness, that's an order. The Admiral's expression showed his displeasure, but he complied. On the tactical display, the surviving Valkyrie ships began retreating to the system's outer edge. Why? Zaratiel asked Marcus quietly. Because fighting them conventionally is suicide, and we need to understand what they actually want, Marcus replied. Look at their behavior patterns. Zaratiel studied the display more carefully. The unknown ships had destroyed the military vessels efficiently, but had made no moves toward the inhabited planets. Instead, they were conducting what appeared to be detailed scans of the industrial facilities. They're not trying to conquer the system, she realized. They're studying it. Exactly. Which suggests they're gathering intelligence rather than territory. Before Zaratiel could respond, new signals appeared on the display. 3 separate fleets were approaching the Altair system at maximum speed, their energy signatures identifying them as Zephyrian, Crocian, and ethereal vessels. They're responding to our message, Zaratiel breathed. Admiral, she called to Tornex. Incoming Allied vessels. Do not, repeat, do not. Engage them unless they fire first. Allied vessels, the Admiral sputtered. Your Highness, those are enemy fleets. Not anymore, Zaratiel said firmly. Patch me through to their fleet commanders. Within minutes, the War Room's communication system displayed 3 additional holographic figures. General Vector of the Zephyrian Dominion, Admiral Krexoth of the Crocian Hegemony, and Ethereal Prime Nixon of the Collective. All 3 looked as grim as Zaratiel felt. Princess Zaratiel, General Vector spoke first, his scarred features showing grudging respect. Your message was unexpected. As was your response, General, Zaratiel replied. I assume this means you recognize the threat we're all facing. These ships destroyed 2 of our scout fleets 6 months ago, Admiral Krexoth reported, his mechanical voice carrying an undertone of anger. We've been tracking their movements ever since. They consumed an entire ethereal research station. Prime Nixon added, their translucent form flickering with distress. Absorbed the technology and the knowledge of everyone aboard. Marcus stepped forward. Consumed? You mean they assimilated the technology and personnel? Unknown, Prime Nixon replied. The station and its occupants simply disappeared. In their place was a data construct containing all our research, but none of our people. Zaratiel felt a chill run through her. An enemy that could absorb both technology and knowledge was far more dangerous than simple military conquest. How many ships do they have? She asked. We estimate 50 to 60 vessels of various sizes, General Vector replied. Each one appears to be unique, possibly incorporating absorbed technologies from different species. Then, we need to coordinate our response, Zaratiel said. I propose a joint fleet action to drive them out of the Altair system while we determine their ultimate objectives. Joint action? Admiral Krexoth's voice carried skepticism. Our species have been enemies for centuries. How do you propose to coordinate effectively? By focusing on survival instead of old grievances, Marcus interjected. General Vector, your ships excel at rapid assault tactics. Admiral Krexoth, your weapons technology is superior to anything else in the galaxy. Prime Nixon, your dimensional manipulation capabilities could provide strategic advantages none of the rest of us possess. Combined with Princess Zaratiel's tactical coordination abilities, you have the foundation for an effective joint force. The four military leaders studied Marcus with varying degrees of skepticism and interest. You speak of coordination as if it's simple, General Vector said. Our communication protocols are incompatible, our tactical doctrines are contradictory, and our command structures are completely different. All solvable problems, Marcus replied calmly. What you need is a unified command structure with representatives from each fleet and standardized communication protocols. I can help establish both. And why should we trust a human to coordinate our military operations? Admiral Krexoth demanded. Because humans have no territorial claims in this conflict and no historical grudges against any of your species, Zaratiel answered before Marcus could respond. Ambassador Chun prevented a devastating civil war among his own people through exactly this kind of coordination. He has the experience and the neutrality to make this work. Prime Nixon's form brightened slightly. The human speaks logic. The ethereal collective agrees to attempt coordination. The Zephyrian Dominion will participate, General Vector said grudgingly. But if this human proves incompetent, we withdraw immediately. Admiral Krexoth was silent for several moments before responding. The Crocian hegemony agrees to try joint operations, but we retain the right to independent action if coordination fails. Zaratiel looked at Marcus with a mixture of admiration and terror. In the space of 10 minutes, he had convinced 3 hereditary enemies to attempt coordinated military action under his guidance. Either he was a genius, or they were all about to die spectacular deaths. Excellent, Marcus said calmly. Admiral Tornex, please patch me through to the tactical officers of all 4 fleets. We need to establish coordinated targeting and communication protocols immediately. For the next hour, Zaratiel watched in fascination as Marcus worked with the 4 fleet's tactical officers to create an impromptu command structure. He identified each fleet's strengths and weaknesses, assigned roles that played to their advantages, and established communication protocols that allowed rapid information sharing without compromising security. More importantly, he did it all with the kind of calm confidence that made even skeptical military officers willing to trust his judgment. Zephyrian ships will conduct hit-and-run attacks to test enemy response patterns, he explained as the plan took shape. Crocian vessels will provide heavy fire support from long range. Ethereal ships will use dimensional capabilities to appear behind enemy formations. Valkyrie forces will coordinate overall tactics and provide defensive screening. What about you? Zaratiel asked quietly. I'll be analyzing enemy responses to determine their objectives and weaknesses, Marcus replied. This isn't just about winning a battle. We need to understand what we're fighting and why. The coordinated assault began an hour later. Zaratiel watched the tactical display with held breath as 4 fleets that had never worked together attempted to drive off an enemy none of them understood. The results were remarkable. Zephyrian ships darted in and out of the enemy formation, their hit-and-run tactics forcing the unknown vessels to spread their defensive fire. Croatian heavy weapons, coordinated through Marcus's communication protocols, concentrated their fire on specific targets with devastating effect. Ethereal ships appeared behind enemy vessels without warning, disrupting their formations and creating opportunities for the other fleets. And, through it all, Valkyrie tactical coordination kept the allied fleets from interfering with each other while maximizing their combined effectiveness. "It's working," Admiral Tornex reported with amazement. "Enemy forces are taking significant damage and withdrawing from the inner system." But, even as the unknown ships retreated, Marcus was studying their behavior patterns with growing concern. "They're not really fighting," he said suddenly. "What do you mean?" Zaratiel asked. "Look at their response patterns. They're testing our capabilities, measuring our coordination, studying our tactics. This isn't a real battle for them. It's a reconnaissance operation." The implications hit Zaratiel immediately. "They're gathering intelligence about our joint operations, which means they'll be back with countermeasures for everything we just showed them." On the tactical display, the unknown ships completed their withdrawal from the Altair system, but not before conducting detailed scans of the Allied fleet formations and their coordination methods. "General Vector," Zaratiel called out, "did your forces record detailed scans of the enemy vessels during the engagement?" "Affirmative, Princess. We have tactical data on their weapons, shields, and maneuvering capabilities." Admiral Krexoff? "Confirmed. Weapon signatures and defensive capabilities documented." The collective recorded dimensional resonance patterns. "Their technology incorporates principles we do not recognize." Marcus nodded grimly. "At least we both learned something from this engagement. The question is whether we learned enough." "There's something else," Zaratiel said, studying the communication logs from the battle. "Look at how well our forces coordinated. Centuries of hostility, completely different military doctrines, and we still managed effective joint operations on the first attempt. Because they had proper coordination and leadership," General Vector admitted grudgingly. "The humans' protocols worked, which suggests that with practice and refinement, we could be even more effective," Admiral Krexoff added, his mechanical voice carrying a note of surprise. Prime Nixon's form pulsed with interest. The collective proposes continued cooperation. These unknown entities represent a threat to all species. Unity serves survival. Marcus looked around at the 4 fleet commanders, then at Zaratiel. "Princess, I think you should make the formal proposal." Zaratiel straightened, feeling the weight of history settling on her shoulders. "Commanders," she said formally, "I propose the establishment of a formal military alliance between our 4 species for the purpose of defending galactic civilization against this unknown threat. Command structure to be jointly determined, with human diplomatic coordination to ensure fairness and effectiveness." There was a long silence as 4 hereditary enemies considered alliance with each other under the guidance of species they had previously ignored. General Vector spoke first. "The Zephyrian Dominion agrees. The Croatian hegemony agrees." Admiral Krexoff confirmed. "The Ethereal Collective agrees," Prime Nixon declared. "Then, it's settled," Zaratiel said, her voice barely steady. "For the first time in galactic history, we stand united." As the communication channels closed and the Allied fleets began coordinating their return to base, Zaratiel turned to Marcus. "Do you realize what you just accomplished?" she asked softly. "We accomplished it," Marcus corrected. "All of us together. You turned 4 enemies into allies in the middle of a crisis. You created a joint command structure that actually worked. You may have just saved galactic civilization." Marcus smiled, but his expression remained serious. "We won 1 battle and formed 1 alliance. The real work is just beginning. These unknown entities aren't going to give up after 1 setback, and keeping an alliance of former enemies together will be at least as challenging as fighting them." Zaratiel studied his face, seeing the weight of responsibility he carried and the determination to see this through despite the enormous challenges ahead. "I have a question for you," she said quietly. "What's that?" Are you still interested in that courtship we discussed? Marcus's smile widened. Are you asking me to marry you, princess? I'm asking if you'd be interested in a partnership, Zaratiel corrected. Political, military, diplomatic, and personal. Because I think we work well together. Yes, Marcus said simply. I'd be very interested in that. As alarms continued to echo through the palace, and allied fleets coordinated their defense against an unknown threat, Princess Zaratiel of the Valkyrie Empire and Ambassador Marcus Chun of Humanity began planning not just a marriage, but the foundation of a new kind of galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The unknown enemy had given them the greatest gift possible, a reason to unite instead of fight each other. 6 months after the Battle of Altair, the wedding of Princess Zaratiel and Ambassador Marcus Chun was held aboard the massive neutral station that had become headquarters for the Galactic Defense Alliance. Representatives from hundreds of species attended the ceremony, marking not just the union of two individuals, but the formal solidification of the most successful military alliance in galactic history. Zaratiel stood before the assembled dignitaries in her ceremonial armor, polished to a mirror shine and adorned with honor marks from a dozen battles against the entities they had come to call the Devourers. Beside her, Marcus wore the simple black diplomatic uniform that had become his signature, though it now bore the insignia of Supreme Alliance Coordinator, a position created specifically for him. Today marks more than the joining of two lives, Empress Nixaria declared from the ceremonial platform. It represents the triumph of cooperation over conquest, understanding over prejudice, and love over ancient hatred. The assembled crowd murmured approval, though Zaratiel could see the underlying tensions that still existed between the allied species. 6 months of successful military cooperation had not erased centuries of mistrust overnight. As the ceremony concluded and they exchanged the ritual vows that bound them not just personally, but politically, Zaratiel reflected on how much had changed since Marcus first arrived at the Imperial Palace. The Devourers had proven to be an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. They absorbed not just technology, but the knowledge and memories of everyone they encountered, growing stronger with each engagement. Conventional military tactics were useless against an enemy that learned and adapted faster than any organic species could respond. But Marcus's coordination protocols had proven remarkably effective. By constantly sharing information between all allied forces and rapidly adapting tactics based on real-time analysis, they had managed to stay one step ahead of the Devourer's learning curve. More importantly, the Alliance had discovered something crucial. The Devourers seemed to have difficulty processing the unpredictable cooperation between species that had historically been enemies. You may now seal your union, the Empress announced. Marcus and Zaratiel touched foreheads in the traditional Valkyrie gesture of intimate trust, then shared the human custom of a kiss. The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed through the station's vast ceremonial chamber. But even as they celebrated, Zaratiel's mind was on the tactical briefing scheduled for immediately after the ceremony. Recent intelligence suggested the Devourers were preparing for their largest offensive yet, and the Alliance would need every advantage they could muster. Congratulations, Your Majesty, Marcus said quietly, using her new title as Empress-elect. Congratulations to you as well, my husband, Zaratiel replied, still adjusting to the concept of sharing her life with another person. Ready to save the galaxy? Always, Marcus said with the grin that had become familiar to her over the months of their courtship and engagement. The reception was necessarily brief. Within 2 hours, they were in the Alliance's main tactical center, surrounded by the military leaders who had become their closest allies and friends. Status report, Zaratiel requested as she took her position at the Central Command Station. Admiral Krexoff activated the main display. Devourer fleet strength estimated at over 200 vessels, with capabilities based on absorbed technology from 17 different species. They're massing in the Vega sector for what appears to be a coordinated assault on multiple targets. General Vextar leaned forward intently. Our scout reports suggest they've learned to counter our rapid adaptation protocols. They're preparing identical simultaneous attacks on 6 different systems, forcing us to spread our response across multiple fronts. Divide and conquer, Marcus observed. Classic strategy, but effective when you have superior numbers. Prime Nixon's ethereal form flickered with concern. The collective's analysis suggests their target selection is not random. They are striking at systems containing critical alliance coordination facilities. Zaratil studied the tactical display with growing alarm. The 6 target systems included the main Valkyrie shipyards, the Zephyrian Strategic Command Center, the Croatian Weapons Development Facilities, the Ethereal Dimensional Research Station, and 2 critical communication hubs that kept the Alliance functioning. They're not just trying to defeat us militarily, she realized. They're trying to break up the Alliance itself. Which means they've identified our unity as our greatest strength, Marcus added grimly. And they're correct. Individually, none of our species can match them anymore. Only together do we have a chance. So what do? General Vextar demanded. We can't effectively defend 6 systems simultaneously, and if we lose those facilities, the Alliance collapses. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the enemy dispositions with the intense concentration Zaratil had learned to recognize. We don't defend, he said finally. I'm sorry. Admiral Krexotha's mechanical voice carried confusion. We don't defend the systems they're attacking, Marcus repeated. We attack them while they're spread out. Explain, Zaratil ordered, though she was beginning to see the logic of his thinking. They're expecting us to divide our forces to defend multiple targets. Instead, we concentrate our entire combined fleet and strike at their staging area while they're dispersed across 6 different fronts. We eliminate their main force before they can coordinate their attacks. That's incredibly risky, General Vextar protested. If we fail, they'll destroy all 6 target systems unopposed. If we succeed, we eliminate their main offensive capability and force them to retreat, Marcus countered. The key is speed and coordination. We hit them before they can recall their dispersed forces. Prime Nixon's form pulsed with calculation. Dimensional jump capabilities could allow rapid fleet concentration without detection. The Ethereal Collective could provide transportation. Zephyrian rapid assault ships could spearhead the attack, General Vextar added thoughtfully. If we achieve complete surprise, Croatian heavy weapons could deliver decisive firepower once we're in position, Admiral Krexoth continued the planning. And Valkyrie tactical coordination could maximize effectiveness. Zaratil felt the familiar surge of excitement that came with a plan that was both audacious and potentially brilliant. It was exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that had made Marcus so effective. How long do we have? She asked. 6 hours until the Devourers begin their coordinated attacks, Admiral Krexoth reported. Then we have 5 hours to position our forces and 1 hour to eliminate their main fleet, Marcus said calmly. It's going to be close. The next 5 hours were a masterpiece of coordination and logistics. Using ethereal dimensional manipulation technology, the entire Allied fleet was transported to positions surrounding the Devourer's staging area without being detected. Zephyrian assault ships prepared for rapid attack runs, Croatian heavy weapons locked onto priority targets, and Valkyrie command ships coordinated targeting and timing with split-second precision. Zaratil stood in the command center of the flagship, wearing her battle armor and watching the tactical display with intense focus. Beside her, Marcus monitored communication channels and enemy response patterns, calling out observations and recommendations that kept the complex operation synchronized. All fleets in position, reported the various fleet commanders. Enemy forces remain concentrated and unaware of our presence, confirmed the reconnaissance ships. Attack commences in 30 seconds, Zaratil announced. All units, remember, speed, coordination, and overwhelming force. We get one chance at this. The assault began with devastating precision. Ethereal ships materialized throughout the Devourer formation, their dimensional weapons tearing holes in space itself. Zephyrian assault vessels darted between enemy ships like deadly insects, their rapid-fire weapons disrupting communications and targeting systems. Croatian dreadnoughts unleashed concentrated firepower that vaporized entire Devourer vessels in single strikes. And through it all, Valkyrie coordination kept the Allied forces working in perfect harmony, maximizing damage while minimizing friendly fire incidents and tactical interference. Enemy formation is collapsing, Admiral Krexoth reported with satisfaction. Their command structure appears to be compromised. Devourer vessels attempting to recall dispersed forces, General Vextar added. But we're disrupting their communications faster than they can adapt. For 20 minutes, the battle raged with unprecedented intensity. The Devourers fought back with absorbed technologies and tactical knowledge from dozens of species, but they couldn't match the coordinated effectiveness of an alliance that had learned to think as one organism while maintaining the diversity of multiple species. Enemy main force neutralized, Prime Nixon announced as the last major Devourer vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of dimensional energy. Remaining vessels are retreating to unknown coordinates. The command center erupted in cheers, but Marcus raised a hand for silence. Status of the 6 target systems? He asked urgently. All 6 systems report successful defense. Admiral Krexoth confirmed. The dispersed Devourer forces were too weak to overcome local defenses once they realized their main support was gone. Zaratiel felt a surge of relief and triumph unlike anything she had ever experienced. They had not just won a battle. They had broken the Devourer's main offensive capability and proven that the Alliance could function as a unified force while maintaining the distinct strengths of each member species. Casualty reports? She asked. Minimal across all fleets, General Vextar reported. Our coordination prevented most friendly fire incidents, and concentrated firepower minimized exposure time. Outstanding, Zaratiel said, then activated fleet-wide communications. All Alliance forces, this is Empress Zaratiel. Today you have proven that cooperation is stronger than conquest, that diversity is more powerful than uniformity, and that when free species choose to stand together, no enemy can defeat them. You have my deepest gratitude and my eternal respect. The response from hundreds of ships across multiple fleets was immediate and overwhelming. Voices from dozens of species cheering in dozens of languages, all united in victory and relief. As the celebration continued, Marcus moved closer to Zaratiel. How does it feel to save the galaxy on your wedding day? He asked with a smile. Like the perfect beginning to a partnership, Zaratiel replied, leaning against him in a way she had learned he enjoyed. Though I suspect this won't be our last crisis. Probably not, Marcus agreed. The Devourers will regroup eventually, and there are always new challenges in a galaxy this diverse. But now we know that different species can work together effectively when they choose cooperation over conflict. And we know that love can exist between very different people, Zaratiel added softly.